I'd like to introduce the speakers. When I call out a name, please approach the dais and then we'll have the introductions. Mr. Apar Gupta, who's an advocate and technology policy expert. Please give a huge round of applause for Mr. Apar. Senior Advocate Harish sir. Please give a huge round of applause for Harish sir. Mr. Rameesh, who's currently the President and CEO of Indian Tech Org. I think the clubs can be louder, guys. Thank you. And finally, Gaurav Jain, sir, who's the founder of Lex Comply. Also accompanying us is Himanshu, sir. Himanshu Gupta ji, please approach the dais. Thank you. We'll just have a short introduction for all our speakers, followed by which they will deal with the idea of intersection of law and technology. Well, as they say, technology is a good servant, but a dangerous master. Mr. Apar Gupta, he's an advocate and a litigation and technology lawyer and has represented a diverse range of clients, including government departments, tech startups, and large technology companies. He began public interest advocacy by representing a cartoonist in a PIL, the Information Technology Act 2000. He's also co-founded the Internet Freedom Foundation, promoting digital rights and human freedom for all Indians. Congratulations for that, sir. Harish sir is a designated senior advocate. He was founding partner of the law firm Samvad Partners, headquartered in Bengaluru. Harish sir appears regularly before courts and tribunals in India on a variety of matters, and he's also co-founded Daksh, which is a civil society organization that undertakes research and activities to promote accountability and better governance in India. Mr. Ramesh sir is currently the president and CEO of Indian Tech Org, a think tank and industry group set up by Indian startup founders and funds for supporting internet-based startups, and is considered as the emerging voice of the Indian startups in the internet space. So anyone who's looking for a startup or looking for funds, I think sir is your guy to approach. Gaurav Jain sir is a member of ICSI and a law graduate. He founded lexcomply.com and offers global compliance system covering compliances for India and 23 other international geographies, along with a robust contract management system. It's a pleasure to have you here, sir. And finally, Himanshu sir, who's the founder and CEO of Lawyered and has been involved in scaling up of businesses. So I think this panel is really dedicated to law, technology, startups, and entrepreneurship. And Lawyered is, by the way, a legal tech platform, which is backed by a network of around 70,000 lawyers. That's amazing, sir, which provides for tech-driven interventions. I'll give the floor to you now. Hope you have a great session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Himanshu Gupta. I'm the founder CEO of Lawyered. And as we gather here at the very beautiful intersection of law and technology, which is very close to my heart, and which is actually shaping the landscape of entire legal industry, the way legal services are being rendered, but also the society as well. So through this session and with the help of my co-panelist, we intend to not just talk about the current trends, but also we would like to, I would say, predict the future legal landscapes, how law and technology can coexist in the same ecosystem in a more formidable manner, and also enhancing the accessibility, productivity, efficiency, and justice itself. So with this, I think I would like to touch upon the first and foremost topic, which is, I think no points for guessing, is generative AI or artificial intelligence in itself. So as we know that AI is starting to play a bigger role, especially generative AI, not just in other areas, but also legal per se globally. And there's a lot of talk about whether it is stepping on the toes of traditional lawyering or the erstwhile, the way legal works in the country. So my question it's an open question to the entire panel. What's your take on AI? Do you think it is actually changing the game for better, or it is worse for the professionals? So I repeat, so it's basically
worse for the professionals.
So it's
lawyers or general?
For legal professionals. We're talking about the advent of AI in the legal landscape, in the current scheme of things. Is it for good or is it for bad?
See, we haven't seen enough of it, right? Because there's a lot of, there's a lot more smoke about what AI can do for lawyers in particular and the legal system, in general, than what we have actually seen, right? And it's also a phrase that is generally bandied about without people actually understanding what it means, right? I mean, is AI just a more advanced form of, legal research tools that already existed, or is it going to replace a whole lot of junior lawyers is the question, right? And those are two extremes. Or is it going to actually replace magistrates and judges is another question. So, as I said, all sorts of theories are being bandied about. I think we haven't understood it enough, but the research that's going on into AI in connection with law is all around building tools that are more reliable to help lawyers research better, draft better, summarize better, and know about the law much better. I think so. As an assistive tool, I think it's certainly useful. I mean, why shouldn't we use it? But is it going to? That's certainly the better part. But the few examples that we have seen in the US where lawyers relied on cases that never existed because the AI threw up cases, that's the worrying part. But I suppose, as I said, it's just early days to comment more on that at this stage.
Right. So what you're saying is, if it is used for assisting the lawyers, then it is good. But if it is only to be relied upon blindly, then it is worse. Apar, what do you say?
So I think social use of artificial intelligence is primarily proceeding in terms of its knowledge through generative AI. Generative AI are essentially the chatbots. A lot of this explosion has happened due to the access to ChatGPT, right? And some image to video and text to image tools which are there. So I think we don't know right now what are the possibilities of artificial intelligence itself. I'm incredibly excited and optimistic about this actually. Okay?
Perfect.
And I'll give you my reasons for that. I think there's a possibility in terms of the grunt work which is there, which is on the lower level, for that being automated to a very large extent. Rough translations being made of documents, which may not be to a very high degree of fitness and accuracy, but may be workable. And that's already happening with forms of OCR recognition. Even for people who are not very conversant in English, and especially in a country like India, right, where English is the language in which law is primarily practiced, there's a huge amount of benefit which will come through large language models and translations which are there. Just in terms of correspondence, right? Somebody who's not there from top 50 law school, right? Writing your internship applications, etc. And finally, you can train your own custom GPTs. I think law firms will make their own custom GPTs from the resource and the knowledge management systems which are there. So in ChatGPT, you can actually train your own GPT right now. I've trained my own GPT based on my own writing right now. Okay, and books and guidelines and like standard forms I use for editing. So it's good in terms of having a conversation with somebody. Okay, but you need to also be a person who's using it in the right way. And I think that kind of social intelligence will rise over a period of time. Okay, so I am largely optimistic of the role of artificial intelligence in legal services, but I do feel there will be challenges and risks which will remain.
Perfect. So mixed response. How about relating to this particular point only? When we are using generative AI and tools, it is basically helping us in terms of doing the basic stuff of researching and maybe drafting to a large extent. Of course, it needs, as you said, a professional's view also. Do you feel that, my next question will be to Ramesh and Gaurav, is it going to replace paralegals completely? So the question is it going to replace the paralegal jobs which generally are being taken up by maybe fresh grads or something?
Well, I think there are 2, 3 layers to this whole thing. When you take assistance from technology, both AI as well as bare bones technology in the legal space, and I've been speaking about this in few other legal forums as well. I think one of the things that strongly comes out is many of the legal practitioners do admit that they are talking about technology, but they are the last users of technology themselves. But what is interesting was that I'm now seeing a surge of startups coming in that space, in the legal space, which is not only helping you fix your back office and your house in order, because most of the lawyers earlier used to manage their own shop, and the rigor of maintenance was left to either the lawyer himself managing his or her office, or left to the staff in the office. But what it brought about is that you have now tools both on compliance, both on tracking, both on caseload management, which are taking care of your back-end administrative support requirement to track and trace. But the second thing that has also come about with AI tools coming in, bots coming in, and a lot of other facilities coming in is you are now able to deploy another intelligent layer over the basic administrative work that the rest of the tools are trying to fix. And there is an intelligent layering which you can now make use of to cull out and be looking more proactive and intelligent out there. But that does not take away the oversight and the commonsensical layer that has to be put in there to ensure that what is getting culled out is appropriate, relevant, and accurate. So a simple example is that, we keep playing on the, what you call the AI tools, and sometimes we ask queries of questions which have not even come out from the government side. And we do get answers for those as well.
So hallucination factor still stays with generative AI, which I understand.
Exactly.
But where I'm trying to touch upon is, I'm from the legal tech background. So I have come up with certain Indian-specific startups which are actually working on generative AI paralegal, where the hallucination probability is negligible, nearly zero, completely fencing on the case laws, legislations that are there in the constitution in the country. So does it cut away the paralegal job, or do you still see that? We are at the stage where we were thinking when the cars came up, or maybe that it is going to take away the job of bullock carts. So are we at the cusp of that situation where the law students need to be trained more on stuff which can be taken away by generative AI?
So it depends on if the legal fraternity and the early stage practitioners are looking at the mundane element of it, certainly it goes away. Because you now have something generating far better than, and as already mentioned, a better quality of representation and a better quality of content being churned out.
Perfect.
But they need to scale up to the next level
to
do the sieving process.
Gaurav, in your opinion?
So I take it in a manner basis, as a young lawyer, so you are able to do limited activities based on your own experience and the knowledge that comes in. While these legal tech firms, I think, is to enable them to do more value-added work, basically. To more value-added work rather than the limited output. Say, for example, if you have to study about a case, or you have to study about a compliance, so with your experience of 1 or 2 years, you used to do some search engines earlier where you used to get hundreds of outputs, very random output, not correctly being placed, wherein while you're using these chatbots or you're using some legal text, you are able to get more structured output wherein you can show more value-added performance to your seniors. So I really feel that it is going to add value to their CVs as well as their performances within the organization. Because if you look at, just think of it, you have a book, hundreds of books to search from about a particular subject you haven't read about it earlier, whereas Google gave you some support. Now you have these legal tech firms who are giving you legal search or compliance search support. You are able to give them a better answer to your seniors on the research side rather than what you have been doing earlier without these things in place. But again, as I said, it also depends that how you are scaling up yourself or enabling yourself for the better roles to play in an organization by adopting these technologies in a more positive way.
Yeah.
Rather than just thinking of the negative side of it, that your job is in danger, because no, the job is not in danger. It's enabling you basically to do something more value added.
So just to add to what you're saying, so I mean, whenever there is such kind of transformative technology coming in, there is a stage of denial and then there is a stage of adoption. So sooner the legal fraternity gets into that adoption stage, both at the, law students' perspective, as well as the lawyers and senior lawyers and judges' perspective, I think the transformation will happen fast. So till the time we are still in the denial mode, I think it is not going to help. Now the technology advancements in our country is also far, far ahead. And COVID taught us badly to accept and adopt technology, especially in the legal side. So moving on from here, we'll touch upon the legal tech, this topic again. So my next question is to Apar. This is related to digital rights and privacy. So on one hand, we are fighting for digital privacy, whether advocating for laws that protect our online lives, right? On the other hand, we freely give up so much of our personal information on social media and other websites. So how do you reconcile this contradiction in the digital age? Are we giving up privacy for convenience without realizing it?
So the way to conceptualize privacy is through a very good framework articulated by the Supreme Court in the Justice K.S. Puttaswamy judgment. It states that individual privacy is linked to the autonomy of an individual. And autonomy, if you look up the dictionary meaning, means that you make a conscious decision with respect to how you want to take certain actions with respect to yourself. So there's a basis of free will involved, there's a basis of liberty and freedom involved in what you choose to do, right? Now, how does it link to data privacy? It links to data privacy because even when you share something, let's say online, you make a conscious decision either to share it with your family on a WhatsApp group or on an alumni WhatsApp group. Now, that's a very crude differentiation, but that illustration provides you the basis of a certain degree of context, that there is certain information you're comfortable sharing with your family, there's certain information you're comfortable sharing with your spouse, there's certain information you're sharing with the world on social media, and there is certain information you're just not open to sharing itself. So the way the question has been constructed, it's a conventional adversarial contest between privacy and the personal information which is needed to provide us services which makes our lives better, easier, more enjoyable. Something like a voice assistant, Alexa, right? Alexa, play my favorite music. Alexa, wake me up after half an hour, okay? Things like that. But people will say it's getting to know your voice. It can drop in whenever it wants to, right? And this is why. Because you need to have a level of oversight and you need to make sure that the person who's installing a voice assistant, let's say in their living room, okay, that voice assistant is only performing that function and gathering that personal data towards the functionality which is required, which is called purpose limitation. You bring in a law which is called a data protection statute. You bring in a regulatory authority which makes specific regulations, and then you provide for a level of oversight that the company which is running that voice assistant is not actually gathering your personal data above that. So it's not an adversarial contest in which there is a complete level of seclusion of a man staying in a cave, okay, and there is a person who's surrounded by cameras at all points in time without having any level of privacy and individual control in deciding how information will be gathered from them. So this, according to me, is not a contradiction. The problem which occurs with respect to privacy is that digital technology is a form of power. And power, quite often in societies, is hoarded and guarded by institutions which already have power. That may be people who have always had power, the wealthy. They may be people who may be from a certain gender, the men. It may be people who come from a certain caste background. It may be certain institutions, certain people, certain corporations, etc. And that is the problem why privacy is not there. And the second problem is that the larger economic system which has been set up for digital services has been on a basis of what is called as surveillance capitalism. We get to know you more and more through the personal data which you provide, which is necessary for us to provide you services, right? Which will be the claim which will be made by all the big tech platforms, but also a lot of Indian startups. They're essentially data businesses. And then they use that data to also subsidize, not only provide functionality, but they also subsidize the services which they offer to you. And I know for a fact, you will be using all those smartphone applications, even if you make payment for things like a ride delivery platform or let's say a food delivery platform, they still sell your disaggregated data at certain points in time. Even payment companies do it by making profiles of companies because that's a value stream which can be exploited, okay? So there are issues, but I will say it's not an absolute either or, it's a negotiation which needs to occur over a period of time.
But help me understand, so as far as we are using it for our convenience and we are deliberately giving information, it's understandable. For example, if I have to make a payment on any of the UPI app, of course I'm revealing some of my information. But how do we draw a line when that information or data is being misused? I'll give you an example. A couple of months ago, me and my wife were just sitting and out of no context, we started talking about going on a vacation to a Nainital. Immediately I picked up my iPad, picked up Google, it started showing me results for Nainital. So how does this, and how do we, this is where I was saying it's scary, because Google Home or Alexa, they are speaking, they're listening to you all the time. So how do we, I don't know, the law or how it is enabled, and how does it draw a line so that it protects the digital rights and privacy of individuals at large, so that it doesn't get misused? I mean, anybody want to take up, or maybe Apar you can answer?
See, I mean, was it convenient for you to see Nainital just when you opened it?
It was, but it was scary. That means it must be listening to anything and everything that you're talking. Even the fights also.
I see, this, you know, this has always been an issue, right? Anything, and not just in this form of technology, any new technology that we get used to and that we use for convenience, there are always elements that are intrusive. Right? And now we are seeing, at least in our generation, we are seeing an extremely intrusive form of technology, and we are dependent on it. I mean, let's face it. I mean, we are all dependent on it, right? And it's becoming more and more a necessity. I mean, access to internet is now being considered as, you know, as a right that you can't just take away. Yeah. So I think, where are the boundaries? Apar talked about it a little bit. There's a whole, you know, there's debate about consent. Is it really something that you're, is there even something called proper consent? Just using your phone or iPad or using Alexa, are you consenting to, you know, Alexa listening in and suggesting Nainital the moment you're talking Nainital at home, right? So these are not easy answers. I mean, they're not easy questions, and there are no easy answers for it. Is it scary? Certainly it is scary, but it is not, see, I mean, people who understand technology, and I tried to understand it because, you know, it's easy for lawyers to, when we picture it this way or when we phrase it this way. But actually, if you look at it from, say, the big tech companies' perspective, they really don't know who you are, right? It's just pieces of information. It's not as if they're monitoring every move that you make. But it picks up, the technology picks up disaggregated data, as Apar was saying, right? It's not as if they know what Himanshu is thinking or Harish is thinking, at least not to my knowledge. I'm sure, you know, it's probably beyond my understanding. But so disaggregated data being used to provide convenience, how far does it go, how far is it intrusive. I'm sure we will have, as lawyers, we'll see more cases about this. We'll see more nuanced positions being taken. And we will have to debate individual cases. See, at the end of the day, it's individual cases that will illustrate and make the law more clear. And law is always a laggard, right? Law always catches up with technology. Law cannot foresee technology. So law, by nature, will always be one step behind. So what is scary? First, there has to be sort of a social acceptance about what is scary, what is not. And then law will step in, and policy has to be made. But the problem is in terms of policy and big tech and how much big tech is influencing policy. All these are difficult questions, not easy. Is it scary? Yes, but not all the time, and may not be to the extent we think in terms of convenience issues. There may be more scary issues about other forms of surveillance and.
So long ago, I was told that if you are using a product which is free, you are the product. I think Facebook taught us it was free for all, and now we all are product because the advertising agency pays to the Facebook or Meta for giving ads to us, so we become the product indirectly. So moving on to another topic here regarding judiciary and governance, my question to you, Harish sir, is technology is making courts more accessible with things like e-filings, virtual hearings, etc. But some people worry that it's not enough, or even it is creating new hurdles. So from your perspective, is technology really making justice more accessible for everyone, or are there gaps that we are not seeing?
So the first part is easy. The answer is yes, it is making it more accessible. Are there gaps? Yes, there are gaps, and these gaps need to be filled in, but I think it's through using technology better and more intelligently. See, just in terms of accessibility, I'll give you 2 examples, right, or 3 examples. One, now, COVID sort of accelerated the use of video conferencing, for example, right? But that provided the basis for expanding the use of video conferencing to provide access in a different way. In Odisha, for example, there have been in each district, and each district, there are video conferencing hubs that the Odisha High Court set up. So people don't need to come to the High Court physically. They could appear from those hubs. They could go there and appear from those hubs. So that's an example of, improving access to justice. So you don't need to come. For example, Supreme Court, right? People in, I practice in Bangalore. I based out of Bangalore. I don't need to come all the time. I can sit in Bangalore and argue cases. So it saves cost for the client, and it provides access. So it certainly improves access. Are there gaps in how we are using it? Absolutely, yes, there are gaps in how we are using it, because we are trying to force technology onto processes that were not designed for being adopted to new technology. I remember, once, about 10 years ago, there was an office objection raised in a case where the office, the registry had said, original of the photograph not produced. Now, how do you produce an original for a digital photograph? You don't have an original, right? But that's the kind of scrutiny questions that you. So the last time procedure was invented was about 100 years ago. Yeah. And there was no technology of the kind that we are seeing now. So for processes to, if we adopt technology to improve legal processes, then even the procedural aspects need to change for courts to become better. Right? Like notice by email, yes, there are challenges. Notice through WhatsApp, yes, there are challenges. But how far do we want to adopt? How far do we accept them so that they don't violate the principles of natural justice and question the legal process itself? These are difficult questions that we need to answer. Currently, we're only doing a half-hearted job because the legal processes are not digitally native in that sense. Yeah. And then there are privacy issues around using more and more technology. Yeah. Because earlier, while you had a right to go and see a court, but now you can sit in your home and watch court proceedings. Now, there's a substantive difference between being an open court when only few people can go to the court hall,
Yes.
and being an open court when everybody in the country can watch what's happening. So these are things that we need to answer, but certainly it's a positive thing. I don't think we need to look at it negatively.
Right. So I'm fielding the same question to Ramesh, sir. So do you think that there is any gap that we are still seeing, or I mean, from some of the point that Mr. Harish did talk about, that acceptance of technology in governance and courts is definitely welcome. But of course, do you think there's some of the laws need to be amended or some more changes needs to be done where it becomes wholly acceptable?
Well, I think, I mean, if I go back in time, way back 99, 2000, when we started deciding and building all the e-governance structures, I think 2005 is when we first hit the court system, where the e-courts started getting part of the whole narrative, and then the work started towards moving in that direction. On a lighter vein, certainly I am enjoying excerpts of the court proceedings now coming in Instagram and all social media, which is quite hilarious. But at the same time, one of the things that I think, if you look at the whole court process that involves is, for any outsider, I mean, if you ask even the common man, three things they still fear to go into. One is a police station, second is a hospital, and third is a court. Because these three things have a potential bearing of financially wreaking havoc. And if technology can, and in this case, these examples are great, that one, you have at least cut off the need for travel, the need for appearing, and then finally figuring out that there was no hearing that day because the judge took off, and then going back. There are a lot of infructuous expenditure which has been taken care of, although in a still rudimentary manner. But I think there are lots of areas that the courts can go through what we call as process re-engineering. And his examples, a simple example like when things are digital, why are you asking for a printed format which looks like original and needs to be original, are all process-driven changes which the judiciary needs to undertake and go to the next level, keeping in mind that the Gen Z is not culturally aligned to go through the same rigor that possibly our generations or our previous generations have gone through.
So what I'm gathering from here is, like, while of course it is a welcome step, but still from a governance standpoint, many changes in the governance or maybe the law needs to be implemented so that technology becomes fully acceptable, whether it is in terms of an evidence or in terms of court proceeding or some procedures, correct? Okay. So that's a food for thought, I think, for all of us. So taking cue from the previous question, I think next question is to Mr. Ramesh. So navigating legal compliance is like walking a tightrope for startups, right? Especially in the tech world. So on one hand, there is a push to innovate fast. I mean, every single day, innovation is something which is a buzzword, and every startup is pushed to innovate. But on the other hand, there is a maze of regulations to comply with. How do you balance rapid innovation with staying on the right side of the legal requirements? I mean, when somebody is innovating, does legal compliance go out for a toss? Or what do you have to say about it?
Well, that's an interesting question, and we face that almost on a daily basis as we meet more and more new startups and we engage in discussion with most of the founders. The interesting part is that it's like not a double-edged sword, but a situation where you have the startup founder innovating and coming with a new business model. Then the second question that comes in is this model even legit? And if it is legit, then from what perspective is it legit? And if you take it to the regulator or if you take it to the government concerned, the first reaction would have been, and this is what we have seen in the past, is that how do I retrofit and where do I fit this guy in, right? A simple example was that we had an electric car some 30, 40 years back. And while going to school, I used to see that car going around in the streets. And the founders of those cars still hold grudge to say that when we invented the electric car, the first thing the government decided was which all provisions of automobile law should be applied on them. And in the process, we lost out innovating, right? Whereas we could be telling the world how to produce it. I mean, so you run across similar cases in almost every sector where the startup concern says, allow me to innovate. Why are you retrofitting me with an old regulation which looks like, walks like, talks like the business that I am touching base with, but although not running that business? But why are you imposing it on me? Why let me take those licenses and so on? On the other hand, you also have a situation where, I'm an accountant by qualification. You have lawyers here. You are the only odd guy, I think, as an engineer out. But when you innovate, you would say, why should there be this compliance? For me, I'm innovating something, let me go ahead with it. And somewhere, I think that is where nobody notices you so long as you are small. The moment you grow big, you will have an army of people descending on you. We run that situation right from regulation being not applicable to you, being retrofitted to you. We find that situation in terms of taxation, where tax is applied to you even though you don't even exist in that nomenclature of applicability of tax. We have situations where a load of compliances applies to you when it has no business of being applied to you. A simple case point being travel and tech sector. I open a travel startup and let's assume I want to sell hotels. Why should I open offices in every city where the hotel is located when I'm in the online business? But none of these rules apply if I take a boat and pass out of the territorial waters of India. None of these regulations apply on me. So we have those kind of scenarios which are compliance driven. So you have a situation where I have to file 37 returns, 111 filings within a span of 3 months. And you would say, hey, I'm here for running a business, for innovating, and not necessarily run an army of accountants or take services from Lex Comply, right? So therefore, the question comes in for the founder is to say, why are so many compliances? Why am I pushed into that? I should be actually running my business. The investor point of view comes saying, hey, you are spending too much time on compliance. Why are you not running and innovating on the business? So we do have those layers. And the third layer that I have been warning about in my articles as well is that while innovation is a great story to be, growing is a great story to be, compliance has to be still looked at because governance mechanism and corporate governance mechanism cannot be thrown out of the window.
But isn't it, I'm sorry, I'm butting in here. So while at this, on one side we have, so much push on startup rights. When you talk about startup, it is about innovation. So if you have young guys or lads who are working on new ideas and innovative, don't you think there should be similar push on innovative, on compliance too? They should also be evolving the same pace, the way the startup industry is evolving. I'll give you an example. So when I left my corporate world and started Lawyered as a legal marketplace, there were so many huge compliances around it. We tried to stay as clear, crystal clear as possible. Other than Lawyered, all the other competitive platforms were in gray area and they were held under a PIL, litigation. We were the only one which was left. But suddenly I realized that the compliance is so hard that it is not allowing me to reach to the sky. The vision that I had created. I immediately pivoted. I had to pivot because I was thinking that this compliance law is not going to change. I don't want to name that law, but it was actually deterrent to the growth of all the legal marketplaces in the country. So legal marketplace, which is a flourishing, what you call it as business in nations like US, UK, Canada, it is so diminishing in India. There is hardly any platform which is now taking up legal marketplace, which is itself like bridging the gap between consumers and lawyers. But again, the innovation at which, the speed at which the startup founders are asked to innovate, why don't we see the same pace of innovation in compliance?
Well, if you look at that story, we do see a lot of paradoxes in the market, right? On one side, you have Digital India and the beauty of the startup ecosystem triggering and creating electronic audit trail for every transaction that's happening. And on the other side, legal, taxation, regulatory compliance is more imposed on those sectors which are actually giving the audit trail to the government. So that's the paradox we see. For example, you take the case, on one side you have a statesman-like approach pushing Digital India. On the other side, you have compliances and taxation jumping on the same startup, which is triggering that audit trail and so on. There are also differences in services, by the way. Coming back to again my favorite example which we are representing on, the GST Council, say for example, said that poorest of the poor travel on non-AC buses. They should not have any GST on them. But the same poorest of the poor buys that same bus ticket on an app, GST is applicable, not on the convenience fee, but on the whole ticket. So you can't have a paradox where the poor man on the street suddenly becomes rich when he or she uses a phone or an application, right? So that's the situation we are in. Obviously, I mean, bodies like us and many people like us in the market are trying to educate the government on this front that you can't have this kind of paradoxes. And that's a battle that we need to go on. But as an eternal optimist, I think we all need to continue this fight.
Yeah. So don't take me wrong. So I'm not saying that the compliances should go out of the window. I'm not saying that, but just that the way startup need to innovate, I think legal compliances also need to innovate. So taking a cue from this point, my next question is for Gaurav. So in India, there are thousands of laws and lakhs of compliances. I mean, and now businesses are going global, right? I mean, somebody doing business here can do business in anywhere in the country. So how technology is enabling professionals to serve corporates holistically?
So Himanshu, I think while I just want to add on to what Ramesh sir says about this need of compliance and startups innovation and how I think that 2-3 things which we have to keep in mind while we are starting a business, that why these laws have even come up, what are the objectives. You may be seeing flurry of the laws in past 1.5 years, regulating a lot of e-commerce activities, consumer activities, data being collected, or data protection laws and consumer protection laws coming up. I think the baseline is, if as a startup, as a business person, if you are ethical in your practices regarding services of providing service in the goods, a lot of these laws will never come up. If you see a lot of these laws recently, dark pattern, green washers, these laws have all come up to check the unethical practices. From the regulatory point of view, still the laws are very, very limited on a particular industry. If you see the larger segment of the laws, other is labor laws, environment, health and safety, EHS have a very, very limited role when you talk about e-commerce startups, right? So how technology now, the good thing is, while we were talking about years back, 15, 20, 30 years back, they're very difficult to find out the applicable laws and compliances, right? Then you have seen certain things like Googles of the world coming up. A lot of libraries started digitizing the entire content, wherein you don't need to hunt the books and go to the libraries. Now, with this machine learning and AI coming up and other tools, there are facilities available wherein basis the data points of your business, which may be your business location, which may be your corporate structures, which may be your product or the services you are dealing in, your headcounts, the consumables, financials, your practices of promoting your business or go-to-market strategies, you can really identify the applicable laws for your clients. The only thing is, I think you need to take all these initiatives more positively. As I said previously, when I was talking about whether technology will take away the role of paralegal or young lawyers, I think it is going to add value. Just imagine if somebody comes to you and say, hey, I want to start an e-commerce business, right? And when you say e-commerce business, there may be so many regulations besides just the technology, because the kind of the product and the services what Himanshu himself faced, that he started a startup for providing certain services, right? Now, if as a professional, we are able to guide him using the tech platform that bases the business you are into, what are the red flags? And these technologies are now available within India. We have seen few years back outside India, these were where these technologies were available for case laws especially. Now these technologies are also have available in India at a very, very frugal cost. And secondly, I also very important to educate that in the complete balance sheet and P&L of any startup, they raise millions of dollars for increasing the headcounts, go to the market. What is the kind of percentage they have a legal cost or compliance cost they to be incurred? So there is a saying that compliance is not a cost if you understand what are the repercussions or negative. I say compliance is never a cost seeing your own P&Ls. If you see the P&L of your company wherein you are raising $200 million, $300 million for increasing your business, so going overseas, what is the cost and the legal cost and the compliance cost is really negligible, not even in 1% of it. which helps you to have a sustainable and growing business at all times.
So another related question. I mean, since we're talking about compliance and tech. So tech-driven compliance solutions, they promise efficiency and accuracy, as you said. I think everybody agrees to it. But there's a lot of noise about or chatter about the loss of personal touch or human touch. What's your stance? I mean, do these solutions enhance the compliance process, or do they risk oversimplifying complex legal matters?
I think that's a benefit, that it is it's simplifying. The oversimplifying, I don't know, that's an adjective, how it is being construed. I think the co-panelists have very well said that, look, it's all up to, it's an assistive technology. You don't have to be dependent on it. It is for you to be assisted. Like earlier you have a books, now you have these tech platforms to assist you. Now, the problem what we also happen that while we interact with a lot of professionals and young professionals, they say, will it give you 100%? Guys, if you are already expecting 100%, then on the contrary, you will say, I lose my job. So the expectations have to be very, very clear. The most important is, even before I just give you example otherwise, in the stock market, you have these big names who are stock market giants, and we follow their advice, and they use a lot of technology tools. Now, don't you think that technology tool, nobody else would have bought it? Now, what they do, that technology tool help them to give some data, but final call is from their brains and their experiences, analysis that they have done. Okay? Likewise, these legal tech, whether it's on the compliance side, will tell you, hey, these are the laws, these are the compliances, but it always says, look, you cannot blindly follow it. Ultimately, the interpretation has to be done by a professional.
Correct. So I will give you my own example. So, for example, the tool that I use, Lex Comply, so it tells me about the compliances and processes, right? But at the same time, my response to it is, samajh mein nahi aa raha. Matlab, there has to be some professional who has to understand the response and translate it to me. So, do you think that whatever, what you call it as innovation we may have in the legal compliance, legal tech compliance, is it going to remove the human touch, or human touch is still necessary?
I would say it will improve and increase, and the quality of the human intervention would be better, or involvement would be better, because the professional who was initially relying on limited data available to a lawyer, now the lawyer have a more robust, more comprehensive data points available to them because of the legal tech platforms, that they may be talking about. Say, for example, I say I'm starting a food business. Earlier, I may be talking about income tax, GST, Companies Act, ESI, PF, food safety laws, right? But now within food laws, there can be a vegan food, there can be organic food. You may be talking about food selling being sold online. So if you're selling online, what are the different laws applicable, legal methodologies of the world? Now with this legal tech, you will get the holistic data available to you so that you can analyze, take a conscious call, okay, these are the laws. Now these laws, under these laws, I have these following obligations. Is it making a right fit for my client or not? Or it gives you question to be asked from your client. So it is more increasing. So it will be enhancing your practice, by the way, because you are getting more data points to read, analyze, and then engage with your client. So it is going to day and day increase.
So as I understand, so while the tech, compliance softwares or solutions or legal tech is going to give us more efficient and robust responses, the human touch is still necessary.
It's more than essential. It will always be essential, because it's all depend on us, that while the computers came in, it never decreased any human touch or never decreased our employability. It has increased. Likewise, if you use this legal tech platforms or reg tech platform judicially, it is going to increase our efficiency. It is only, the thing is that the things which are standard though anything which is standard has been automated by the tool to give you the right answer at the right time. But analysis in any case has to be done by you. Nobody can take away the roles of courts, lawyers in doing the interpretations and guiding on that.
Perfect. So moving on from here, I think my next question is for Mr. Harish. So governance is getting a tech makeover. I mean, the technology is being used in the governance completely now. Aiming for transparency and efficiency, of course, that's the objective of adding tech into the governance. Yet many argue the technology can also obscure processes, making things less transparent. So in your experience, is technology in governance living up to its promise of making things clearer and more accountable, or is it complicating matters?
See, as of now, if you ask me, I think it's a mixed bag, right? I think there are some areas where use of technology has brought in more transparency and certainly, made life easier. But, like the earlier question you asked and what Gaurav was answering, right? Human touch.
Yeah.
But that human touch is not necessarily always used positively. The human touch can also be used negatively to reduce the transparency of the technology being made. I'll give you an example, right? Now, property registration.
Yes.
Every state is now saying, oh, it's all digital now. You don't have to come and stand in the sub-registrar's office for hours together. But that's not change. I mean, people still queue up. I mean, whereas passport, that technology adaptation has become better. I mean, so the issuance of a passport, renewal of a passport is easier.
Yeah.
But it's not the same in the revenue department. So these are not technology problems, they are governance problems. So I think both in terms of, so the adapting of technology for transparency, it's not a silver bullet. It depends on the political and bureaucratic will to adapt this and to make things better.
So you mean to say that to be, it's a question of the center and the state to have adoption of technology?
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's not a technology problem, it's a people problem.
Ramesh, sir, you want to add to it?
Well, I keep telling this aspect that the process re-engineering bit is the one which can make a difference. And as more and more touch points are reduced, discretion is reduced. But at the same time, there are places where you may still need a touch point. So the touch point should be to ease the process and not make it to such an extent that discretion becomes a problem. I mean, in your own industry and the kind of cases you come across, and the kind of cases we discussed, we have a problem where technology is acting dumb and going blunt. And a human would have probably looked at it differently, more in the case of the way people are challaned on the streets and so on. So there are places where human touch is required, but that human touch should be for the purpose of easing and not for the purpose of using discretion to complicate and using discretion to delay.
But then it all boils down to governance then. I mean, how?
Exactly.
Yeah. So my next question is to Apar. With governments around the world pushing for more access to personal data in the name of security, where do we draw the line? Is the trade-off between national security and individual privacy rights justified, or are we sliding towards the Orwellian future?
There are a couple of questions there you're asking me. So since it's a law and literature festival, I'll make reference to some literature.
Wow.
So you've mentioned Orwell, right, towards the end. And when we say Orwellian future, that refers not only to his work 1984, which is classic, and I love that book, but also Animal Farm, right? And what happens in the end in Animal Farm is essentially a violent anarchy in which a rule-based order is broken down, in which society completely devolves to a system of force and violence and cunning. Now, there was a public educator called Neil Postman. He is actually a media scholar. And he wrote this book called Amusing Ourselves to Death. What he talks about in the book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, is the transformation of television reporting, which was being impacted by the advent of the televisions becoming nightly news in terms of format, and the presentation itself becoming slicker, the visuals themselves having color. And his basic concern was that the line between entertainment and journalism has started blurring. We want the news reader to look a certain way. Okay? So there has been a change in technology from the voice of, let's say, Edward Murrow or Mark Tully, right? To some person who looks like much more pleasant to our eyes. Now, I won't say who looks pleasant to my eyes, but you can imagine a news reader, right? And there is this statement in his book in which he says that the future will not only be Orwellian due to technology. He also makes reference to another great book on dystopias, which is Huxley's book, which is called Brave New World. And what is Brave New World is essentially a place where there's no crime. But there's no crime because it's not that there is a totalitarian government like in Orwell's 1984, which controls everything you do. It prevents you from doing what you do. And you always are under surveillance. That's not Huxley's world. In Huxley's Brave New World, it's a world of abundance, of you engaging your most hedonistic desires, in which you're getting whatever you want on an app, possibly, in 8 minutes. But the thing which you get is called a drug called Soma. And when you take Soma, you're physically, intellectually, sexually, morally, you're satisfied. Okay? So, what he says is that our future is part Orwellian and part Huxleyan, which is what we are today in a lot of ways due to technology. It's a complex relationship which enables a lot of human function, economic development, social inclusion, but at the same point in time, it sometimes makes us feel sick, controlled, right? Where each piece of our data, especially for younger people who use social media, right, is sucked up by a company which always surveils us, but we have to participate in that large social media network or in instant messaging for us to be a part of a functional society, right? And yet at the same point in time, we seem to like it. We scroll endlessly, which is called doom scrolling, right? So that's Huxleyan. Now, how do governments enable this kind of dystopia? And I'm not only talking about in India, but globally, is because when you look at the late capitalism or neoliberal order which is there are a few corporations in every country which are becoming in 3 or 4, there's a huge amount of, firstly, income inequality, and the top 5 corporations in every segment of activity are becoming larger. Okay? And that's happened in the digital businesses as well. Now, the corporations become larger because they're also able to influence policy. But when there are technology corporations who gather data for, let's say, business purposes, not for political purposes, the data can be used to control people. Now, at the base of it, when you have technology which serves a better use to you, the more it gets to know you, but also the technology provider profits more, the more it gets to surveil you through multiple streams. It will also then collaborate with the government for ensuring that that data is made available to the government. In the United States, which has a better rule of law framework than India, and I say this objectively on the basis of assessment, okay, the NSA purchases personal data from companies. And in India, those demands are made or regulations are made, like CERT has a cybersecurity regulation, or there are much more conventional ways how data can be acquired by the government. So more and more, technology is playing a role in power relationships becoming much more skewed towards large corporations and governments. This is a global phenomena, and it is actually called by a phrase called digital authoritarianism. Okay?
Very relatable answer to the legal lit fest we are in. Thank you so much. So this brings us almost to the end of the panel discussion. One last question, and then I'll, I think, open up for Q&A. The legal tech is all about making legal help more accessible, right? But there's a worry that it might actually leave some folks behind, especially those who aren't tech savvy. So what do you have to say that legal tech closing the, is legal tech closing the gap, or it's creating a new kind of divide in the legal access? I mean, anybody can take it.
So there's already a very basic gap. As per government surveys, about 70% of people who have accessed the internet do not know even how to attach, put a word attachment or a file attachment to an email. But there are also other segregations. Now you look at TRAI data, urban versus rural. In New Delhi, you have about 2.6 connections per person as per the recorded population. And in rural, you have half of that. If you look at the NSSO surveys, then it further drops in terms of men and women who have ever accessed the internet. And then if you get into caste divisions, socially backward classes, etc. So those divisions are there. What is the problem, I would say, is that I think policy needs to account for that. This, how do you, firstly, every government, I would say, recognizes that there's a level of inequality which exists in society. And when you provide technology-based solutions, there is a likelihood that inequality will increase. So you need to intervene through policy and support services. So I think that's there. I only talked about basic internet services, access right now. Okay? Yes. Now you think in terms of the ability, in terms of comprehension, etc., and then it becomes much more challenging. But I would say it still benefits a large number of people, but it requires state intervention for support for people. Otherwise, the gaps do increase.
Perfect. So closing remarks, Harish sir, what do you think, that is it closing the gap or, yeah?
It's not closing the gap. It's certainly, see, it creates new forms of gaps. It creates new form. It's generally more inclusive and it's meant to be inclusive, but it does create new methods of exclusion, right? Just one more example. Like COVID, using of video conferencing was touted as success, courts functioned. But the number of, forget about litigants, the number of lawyers who were excluded from that process itself was challenging because they didn't have access to laptop, internet. They didn't have an office to sit and participate. And some judges took exceptions to lawyers, participating in court proceedings from home or kitchen or, car, garden. So there are a lot of other forms of exclusion. So we need to be more mindful. The answer is yes and no. I know it's not a straightforward answer, but that's the answer.
Ramesh sir, your closing remarks. Is legal tech closing the gap or it is increasing?
Well, I think it is the process that has begun, and it has to evolve. It has to be also equally backed in the back end, because technology merely for adoption's sake alone will not work.
Yes.
There are even other, there are challenges for different strata on how well you are able to play along with. Even the best literate, what you call technology literate, are finding their own challenges in engaging with the system. Simple things can be even like when you are asked to upload a file which has to be 20 KB, and you are still cutting, and finally you realize that it looks like the most pixelated horror you can think of. So you have those challenges for certain levels of people. You have a second set of challenges for even understanding where should I navigate, and you have the basic level to say, oh, how do I even open a system and engage? But as I said, the process is necessary, undoubtedly. You can't still be living in the earlier system. But the process will have pains for different strata, and it's an evolution process which shouldn't stop, but at the same time, one which shouldn't create what you call, what they say as ease of doing business, for lack of a better word. Ease of engaging is something that should be kept in mind.
Thank you. Gaurav?
So I take it from two perspectives. One is ease of from utility perspective, other is from the cyber security or data security perspective. I think this is a journey which has just begun, or will anything you do start. So it's more of like, while you have the inputs of the user experiences or the processes that you develop, what is the improvements to be done through technology. And on the other side, while you talk about cyber security or security of the data, I think it's more of like you have more innovative people who try to intrude into your data, then you have to become smarter to cut short or cut down their intrusion in your data. So it's an ongoing process, and it's like new versions of data security coming up and new versions of the software coming up with the need of it. So it's a journey which has to be mindfully taken while you are bringing in any technology in any sphere of your business or activities or life. you are into.
Perfect. I also consider that the advent of or the use of legal tech for in terms of accessibility perspective for consumers, it is a evolving stage. So the more the technology is spreads across the length and breadth of the country, and the governance is simplified. So I think we'll have this legal tech more on consumer side than against them. So with that, I think we're closing the session. In case there are any questions, feel free to ask.
Myself is Subhajit Datta, associated with Union of India in some special constitutional capacity. The discussion is very interesting, and I want some solution from all of you based upon personal experience. I am adding the judicial perspective and the necessity of surveillance with regard to digital use, authoritarianism, abuse. Very recently, I have been appearing in person also before some courts of law up to Supreme Court of India. Honorable Chief Justice of India is trying to enhancing the digitalization of Indian judiciary. On the other hand, lower court judges in Delhi itself, they are trying to blocking the video conferencing procedure, and they are trying to have the person, even civil judge lawyers, they are behaving as if there are some criminal judges, maybe due to some hangover. For example, the question is how there can be some surveillance that the judges themselves or the presiding authorities themselves are not blocking the digital actually utilities for the litigants, consumers, or whosoever, because they are not at all prepared. Sometimes they are saying that poor network at your end, whereas I am doing video
So your
conference.
question is that, is there any law or their governance to ensure that the judges do
or
not
the authority-
supersede this?
Yeah.
I'm not
and
aware.
the gap,
Is there any law?
and the gap also.
So basically, look, first of all, even the e-courts process, we have to really appreciate the judgment or the wise judgment of the presiding officers. Secondly, technology is also evolving. There are various aspects. I think one is there might be cases wherein because of certain necessity or certain importance of the factors, they might have not followed a technology as a use, or they might like to give in-person hearings. So I think, again, secondly, it's an evolving thing. It cannot be pressed upon. So that is the whole idea while we were discussing the entire session is, it is something you need to analyze and then implement. You cannot be blindfoldedly be pushed to use certain technology or certain thing because it's a technology, right? So I think that is the only thing we can comment upon, because it's, again, an evolving side of it. That's it.
I think being mindful of the time, I think we have crossed the limit. I think we'll, thank you so much, the co-panelists, for this wonderful discussion, and I leave it to you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. You're right, sir. We request the panelists to stand up for a group photo, and also Harish sir will be giving out the mementos to all our panelists. Please have a round of applause for all our speakers for this session. Thank you.